His name was Marcus Chen, the most wanted man in the galaxy. Not because he carried a weapon. He'd never held one in his life. Because he found one number. In the ledger of a 10,000-year-old empire. A number that was never supposed to move. The empire sent their best. Their fastest ships. Their deadliest hunter. The keeper of the ledger, who had ended 100 rebellions and never once left a trace. They came to kill a bookkeeper. They still thought a bookkeeper could be killed with weapons. He wasn't going to fight the empire. He wasn't going to run. He was going to do something they never once, in 10,000 years, thought to defend against. This is the story of the empire that built the perfect trap and walked into it themselves. To understand what Marcus Chen did, and why an empire of 10,000 years was about to fall, you have to understand the machine he was staring at. The Galactic Hegemony was not a military empire. It was not a religious empire. It was an accounting empire. Its power did not come from its battleships, although its battleships could blot out a sun. Its power came from a single, sacred, immovable principle. The tribute, 20% of a planet's energy output, rendered to the empire, every cycle, without exception, for 10,000 years, not 100 years, not 1,000. 10,000. A span so vast that entire species were born, grew to sentience, built civilizations, and crumbled back into dust, while the tax collectors never once changed their routine. The ledger was the true heart of the empire. It had been built by a species that no longer existed. It was maintained by administrative castes that had long since forgotten why the rules were written, only that the rules must be followed. It was written in a language older than the stars it governed, and it was updated by hand. That was the first secret of the hegemony's power. Not its might, not its technology. Its sheer, crushing institutional inertia. A system so vast, so ancient, so intricate that it simply could not change. It did not need to adapt, because nothing had ever challenged it. It did not need to think, because thinking was a luxury for species that had not yet been broken by 10,000 years of debt. And here, take a moment to feel the weight of that, because it matters. Every species that entered the hegemony's dominion was not conquered in a single war. It was conquered slowly, quietly, over generations. The tribute was the chain, but the chain was not made of iron. It was made of arithmetic, and arithmetic, once you accept it, never lets go. The second secret of the hegemony's power was the weight itself. The tribute was never just 20% of the top. It was the best of everything. The young, the brilliant, the ambitious, skimmed off before a world could grow strong. The surplus that might have funded a fleet, or a university, or a dream. Taken, every cycle, without mercy. A species could not accumulate. It could not build a reserve. It could not plan beyond the next payment. Every civilization that entered the hegemony slowly, inexorably, sank into a state of permanent serfdom. Not through conquest. Through arithmetic. The empire didn't need to break your spirit with chains. It could break your future with a tax. And the aliens accepted it. That was the most terrifying thing about them. They accepted it because they had never known anything else. Their great-great-grandparents had paid the tribute. Their ancestors had paid it. The tribute was as natural to them as gravity, as inevitable as the rising of their sun. They had a word for it that translated, roughly, to the price of existing. It was not questioned. It was not resisted. It was simply paid. For 10,000 years, that was enough. Then a species arrived that looked at the most stable system in the galaxy, and saw, not a law, but a seam. This is where you meet Marcus Chen properly. Because this story isn't about a species. It's about one man who refused to stop looking at a number. Marcus was a tribute auditor on Terra Secunda, a nothing colony on a nothing world, 3 jumps from anywhere that mattered. His job was to verify the planet's energy output and calculate the 20% owed to the empire. It was the most boring job in the galaxy. It was also, by a stroke of cosmic luck, the most dangerous. Because Marcus was good at his job. Borderline obsessive. He checked the imperial exchange rates against the local market, just to make sure the numbers were honest, he told himself. Just a hobby. Just a habit. And one night, over a cup of cold coffee, He found the seam. Let me explain what that means. The empire's fiscal law was built on lag. A tribute payment was assessed, transmitted to a distant accounting hub, verified by a chain of bureaucratic checkpoints, and finally credited to the imperial treasury. Each step was slow, each step was sacred. Each step was, to the empire, utterly unchangeable. Marcus clocked the lag within his first year. It wasn't a secret. It was simply a fact no one had ever thought to exploit. Because no one had ever thought to try. The tribute system was not built for speed, it was built for permanence. Every payment traveled through a network of subspace couriers and administrative relays that could take, at the outer edges of the empire, entire standard years to complete. The ledger was not a live system, it was a record of the past. Always, hopelessly, about 10,000 years behind the present. To the hegemony, this was a feature. Stability required slowness. Change was the enemy of control. To Marcus Chen, it was a door left open. Here's what most people get wrong about what Marcus did next. He didn't want to break the system. Breaking it would have been futile. It was too vast, too redundant, too deeply embedded to destroy. Anyone could see that. What Marcus saw was something subtler. And far more dangerous. The system was slow, and slowness, in the right hands, is not a weakness. It is a weapon. So Marcus found the lag. And he began to build a machine that could move faster than it. But he made one mistake. The mistake that nearly killed him. He told his supervisor. The supervisor's name was Tesk. And Tesk was not a traitor. Tesk was a coward. And in an empire built on 10,000 years of unchanging order, cowardice was the same thing as loyalty. Tesk did what every frightened bureaucrat does when they see something they don't understand. He reported it. Up the chain. To the provincial accounting office. To the sector tribunal. And finally, because the numbers were so strange, so unprecedented, to the one being in the galaxy who had spent a lifetime enforcing the tribute with absolute, merciless certainty. His name was Peter Vorsath. And this is where our story acquires its teeth. Vorsath was not a bureaucrat, he was a hunter who had been given a desk. For 6 centuries he had served the hegemony, not as a soldier, but as an auditor of the most dangerous kind. He found the seams that others hid. He found the species that dreamed of resistance before they had the courage to act. And he ended them, quietly, completely, without a single ripple reaching the imperial ledger. His title was Keeper of the Ledger. His function was extermination. Take a moment to understand what kind of being Vorsath was. He did not hate humanity. He had never met a human. He did not enjoy what he did, in the way that cruelty enjoys itself. He was something worse than a sadist. He was a functionary. A creature who had so completely merged with the machine he served that he no longer had a self to betray it. The empire had ruled for 10,000 years by producing beings exactly like him, loyal, efficient, and utterly incapable of questioning the order they enforced. For 6 centuries, that had been enough. Vorsath had never failed. He had never doubted. The ledger was eternal, and he was its hand. When Tesk's report reached him, Vorsath read it in silence. He read it again. And for the first time in 6 centuries, the keeper of the ledger felt something he had not felt since the day he was promoted to the office. Unease. Because the report was not about a rebellion, it was not about a fleet. It was about a number, a small, unremarkable discrepancy in the tribute of a backwater human colony. And Vorsath had learned, over 600 years, that the most dangerous threats never looked like threats. They looked like numbers. He ordered a transport. He did not tell the empire why. The keeper of the ledger did not share his hunches with the court. He would go to Terra Secunda himself, he decided, and he would meet this human auditor face to face. He would look into the eyes of the creature who had found the seam. And then he would close it. Permanently, Vorsath's ship dropped out of subspace above Terra Secunda on a gray morning. He came without escort, without ceremony, a single, dark vessel hanging in the sky like a held breath. On the ground, Marcus Chen was finishing his shift. He had spent the night building the first version of his machine, a crude trading algorithm, running on borrowed processing power, that could track the imperial exchange rate faster than the empire's own couriers could transmit it. He was tired. He was excited. He was, for the first time in his life, doing something that mattered. He did not see the ship. He did not see the figure that walked into the colony's accounting hall. He did not see Tesk's face go pale as the door opened. He only looked up when the room went silent. The being standing in the doorway was tall, far too tall, and still as a statue. He wore the black robes of the keeper's office, and beneath them, something that glittered faintly in the low light. His eyes, if they could be called eyes, were fixed on Marcus with the patient attention of a predator that has already chosen its prey. Marcus Chen. It was not a question, it was a sentence being read out. Marcus's hand drifted toward the console, toward the data, toward the machine he had built, toward the only evidence of what he had done. "Don't," Vorsath said quietly. And the room understood that the word was not a request. The next 30 seconds changed Marcus Chen forever. The keeper of the ledger did not accuse him. He did not threaten him. He simply walked to the console, studied the algorithm for a long moment, and then, with a single, almost gentle motion, closed his hand around the data core. And crushed it. "A clever trick," Vorsath said, "for a species that does not know what it has found." And then he reached into his robes and drew out a small, black object. It was not a weapon. It was a stamp, the stamp of the keeper's office. "By the authority of the Eternal Ledger," he said, "Terra Secunda is placed under administrative quarantine. Its tribute is suspended until further notice. Its auditor is hereby." Marcus didn't hear the rest. Because at that moment, every alarm in the colony began to scream. The Empire had not come to quarantine a planet, the Empire had come to erase it. And Vorsath, the keeper, the hunter, the master of quiet endings, had just discovered that someone else had been moving pieces on his board. Someone who had spent the last year selling synthetic tribute credits across 3 sectors. Someone who had anticipated, to the day, exactly when the Empire would come looking. Someone who was already 3 steps ahead of the keeper of the ledger.
Here is the truth about Marcus Chen that Vorsath did not know. Marcus was not alone. He had never been alone. The machine he had built was not his. It was humanity's. The night Marcus found the seam, he did what every human does when they find something dangerous and beautiful. He told someone. And that someone told someone else. And within a single human year, there were 11 of them. Within 2 years, there were hundreds. They called themselves, in quiet rooms across a dozen colonies, the Ledger Breakers. And they had been watching Vorsath's approach for 3 standard weeks. The escape happened in exactly 107 seconds. An emergency broadcast, a false one, engineered to look like an Imperial beacon failure, sent the colony's defenders scrambling toward the eastern perimeter. A supply hauler, unremarkable in every way, slid out of the western hangar with Marcus Chen aboard, hidden in a cargo hold full of agricultural machinery. And on the bridge of Vorsath's dark vessel, a tiny piece of human code, planted months earlier by a ledger breaker who had never set foot on Terra Secunda, began to quietly, systematically, corrupt the ship's navigation records. Vorsath stood in the ruined accounting hall, staring at the empty chair where Marcus Chen had been sitting. The colony was burning. The quarantine had become an extermination order, carried out by ships Vorsath had never authorized. He had not given that order. And yet, the ships had come. The order had existed. Somewhere, someone in the Empire's highest circles had wanted Terra Secunda gone. Wanted it gone so badly they had been willing to burn a colony to make it happen. Wanted it gone so badly they had framed the keeper of the ledger for it. Vorsath looked at the crushed data core in his hand. He looked at the burning sky. And the hunter understood, with a cold clarity that chilled even him, that he had been played. He had come to Terra Secunda to close a seam. Instead, he had walked into the middle of a war he had not known existed. A war between the Empire that had ruled for 10,000 years, and a species that had been planning its overthrow for less than a generation. The ship carrying Marcus Chen jumped to light speed, bound for a rendezvous point in the dark between stars. And behind it, the keeper of the ledger, now a fugitive in his own empire, began to do the only thing a hunter can do when the quarry turns. He began to think. The rendezvous point was a dead moon, orbiting a dead star, 1,000 light years from anywhere. It was the kind of place empires forgot, because empires did not need to remember it. It was perfect. The first human financial institution in the galaxy was not a bank. It was a trading floor, built into the hollowed-out core of that dead moon, staffed by people who had spent their lives in the chaotic, high-speed, utterly merciless world of human markets. They did not understand the hegemony's fiscal law the way the empire understood it. They did not need to. They understood something the empire had never learned, because the empire had never needed to learn it. Value's not a fixed thing. Value is a negotiation. Value is a moment. And the moment is the only thing that matters. Marcus Chen walked into the trading floor and the room went quiet. Not out of fear. Out of recognition. This was the man who had found the seam. This was the man the empire had tried to erase. This was the man who had walked through an extermination and come out the other side carrying the data that would end a 10,000-year reign. They did not applaud. They did not cheer. They simply turned back to their screens. And they got to work. Because in that room, there was only one law, and Marcus Chen had just proven he understood it better than anyone alive. Here is the mechanics of what they were about to do. And it is worth understanding, because it is the entire engine of the story. The tribute system required every member species to hold a certain amount of imperial credit, the hegemony's currency, to cover its upcoming obligations. These credits had to be purchased, transferred, and held for a set period before the next payment cycle. It was rigid. It was predictable. Every species knew exactly how much it owed, exactly when it owed it, and exactly what it had to hold in reserve. And because it was predictable, it was tradable. Marcus had realized that the mandatory tax credits, the very instruments of humanity's subjugation, could be treated as a commodity. They were required. They were finite. They were priced. And they were subject to the same laws of supply and demand as anything else in the universe. So humanity built the exchange. And then they flooded it. High-frequency trading rigs. Quant models that could process the hegemony's subspace transmissions faster than the empire's own processors could decrypt them. Algorithms that could anticipate a tribute payment before the empire had finished calculating it. Within a single human decade, the most valuable financial infrastructure in the galaxy was no longer the imperial treasury, it was a trading floor, buried in a dead moon, where the empire's own instruments of control were bought, sold, and repackaged with a speed and sophistication the ancient system had never conceived. And Marcus Chen, the bookkeeper who had found the seam, was the quiet heart of all of it. He stood at the center of the floor, and he gave the order that would bring the galaxy to its knees. Start with the swaps. We take the tribute first. Every revolution has a moment when the old order realizes, too late, that it has been outmaneuvered. For the hegemony, that moment came when humanity invented a financial instrument the galaxy had never seen. They called them tribute swaps. The concept was simple. And the concept was devastating. An alien governor, bound by imperial law to pay a certain tribute, could enter into a contract with a human institution. The contract said, "We will assume your tribute obligation. We will pay it for you. In exchange, you pay us a fee, and you allow us to use your tribute credits however we see fit." To the alien, it looked like relief. To the empire, it looked like a minor administrative curiosity. To humanity, it was the first thread pulled from a tapestry that was about to unravel completely. Because once you hold a tribute obligation, you can bundle it. Once you can bundle it, you can sell it. Once you can sell it, you can slice it, repackage it, and sell it again. To the very governors who owe it. They created structures of debt that were sold back to the alien elites, who were delighted to own a piece of the empire's guaranteed revenue. They did not ask where the value came from. They did not ask what would happen if the foundation beneath it ever shifted. The foundation was about to shift. Here is the ugly secret that made everything possible. Human financial engineers had noticed something about the hegemony's currency. It was backed by nothing. Absolutely nothing. The imperial credit was worth exactly what the empire declared it was worth, because the empire had the power to enforce that declaration. It was a confidence game, run for 10,000 years, never tested because no one had ever dared to question it. They didn't question it. They tested it. They created synthetic assets, mathematical abstractions, with no underlying value at all, that mirrored the price of the hegemony's currency so precisely that the two became indistinguishable. To an alien accountant, a synthetic imperial credit was as good as a real one. It paid the same. It traded the same. It behaved the same. Except for one difference. The synthetic credits were controlled by them. They flooded the market. They made the copies abundant. They made them attractive. And slowly, imperceptibly, they made the empire's guaranteed tax revenue dependent on a human-controlled betting pool, where the odds were set by people who were not playing to lose. The confusion among the alien elites was beautiful to behold. They looked at their ledgers and saw wealth. They looked at their holdings and saw prosperity. They did not realize the value they saw was a reflection, a shimmering, insubstantial image projected by a mirror that humanity was holding. And that humanity was preparing to turn. The moment the mirror turned, the reflection would vanish, and everything they thought they owned would vanish with it. And then, because every great plan has a flaw, and every flaw has a face, the door to the trading floor opened, and the keeper of the ledger walked in.
Vorsath stood in the doorway of the human trading floor, and for the first time in 600 years, the keeper of the ledger did not know what to do. He had tracked Marcus Chen across the galaxy. He had followed a trail of breadcrumbs, false beacons, dead drops, ghost transmissions that had led him here, to a dead moon, to a room full of humans who had built a weapon out of the Empire's own laws. He could have killed them all. He had the power. He had the authority, or what was left of it, after the Empire had branded him a traitor and set its own hunters on his trail. But he didn't move, because the keeper of the ledger had spent 6 centuries enforcing a system he had never once questioned. And in the wreckage of Terra Secunda, in the fire and the screens, and the cold knowledge that he had been framed by his own masters, he had begun to question it. "Tell me," Vorsath said, his voice low and terrible, "why I should not end this now." Marcus Chen looked at the creature who had tried to kill him, who had destroyed his home, who had come to the one place in the galaxy where the whole plan lived. And Marcus did something no human had ever done to the keeper of the ledger. He smiled. "Because," Marcus said, "you already know the Empire is going to fall. The only question is whether you fall with it, or whether you're smart enough to be on the side that's holding the knife when it lands." The silence stretched. The room held its breath. Vorsath looked at the screens, at the numbers moving faster than any imperial processor could follow, at the quiet, ruthless machinery that had taken the most stable system in the universe and turned it into a house of cards. And the keeper of the ledger, the hunter, the exterminator, the servant of 10,000 years of tyranny, made the only choice that could have saved him. He sat down. "Show me," he said, "how it works."
There is a moment in every market, in every empire, in every house of cards, when the world holds its breath. And then the world learns that the thing it was standing on was never solid at all. The collapse did not begin with a war. It began with a whisper. Human banks, coordinated, silent, patient, began to move. They had spent years positioning themselves. They had quietly acquired enormous holdings in the hegemony's currency, and enormous holdings in the synthetic assets that mirrored it. They had taken out positions so vast that the Empire's own treasury did not even realize how exposed it was. And then, on a single, carefully chosen day, they acted. They did not sell the real currency. That would have been too slow. They sold the synthetics. They sold them in volume. They sold them at a rate the ancient system had never experienced, at a speed the imperial processors could not track. They drove the price of the hegemony's own currency down, 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 using its perfect mirror to destroy it. And then they shorted it. They bet against it. They placed enormous, leveraged bets that the imperial credit was about to become worthless. And because they controlled the supply of the synthetics that set the price, their bets were not speculation. They were a promise they intended to keep. The panic began in the outer provinces and raced inward toward the core. Alien governors woke to find their tribute credits, the instruments of their survival, the proof of their obedience, had lost half their value overnight. They tried to sell. There were no buyers. They tried to borrow. There were no lenders. They tried to contact the Imperial Treasury for reassurance. And the Imperial Treasury, the most stable institution in the galaxy, the institution that had never once failed in 10,000 years, had no answer. Because it was doing the same thing they were. It was trying to sell. The hegemony's central treasury had made a catastrophic error. It had assumed its wealth was real. It had never considered that its wealth could be taken. And so it had done what every complacent empire does. It leveraged. It borrowed against its future tax revenue to fund its enforcement fleets, its palaces, its endless bureaucracy. Its entire net worth was tied to a stream of future tribute payments. Payments that were now priced on a market controlled by its enemies. The empire realized, in a single sickening moment of clarity, that its entire net worth was tied to worthless mathematical abstractions. And then the enforcement fleet discovered the liquidity trap. Here is the cruel irony that finished them. The hegemony's military, the most powerful military in the galaxy, ran on money. It paid its officers. It paid its suppliers. It paid for fuel, for maintenance, for the vast logistics that kept its battleships in the sky. And its payroll was held in imperial credits. Imperial credits that were now crashing, collapsing, spiraling into worthlessness faster than anyone could dump them. The fleet could not move. It could not fuel. It could not pay its own people. The great enforcement arm of the Galactic Hegemony, the fist that had crushed 1,000 rebellions, the terror of 1,000,000 worlds, was paralyzed. Not by an enemy fleet, not by a weapon, by a payroll it could no longer fund. The empire that had ruled for 10,000 years was not conquered. It was bankrupt. It did not fall. It collapsed from within, like a star that had finally exhausted its fuel, its light dying not in an explosion, but in a long, terrible, quiet dimming. And at the center of that dimming, calm, patient, holding all the cards, stood Marcus Chen. And beside him, in the black robes of an office that no longer meant anything, stood the keeper of the ledger. They had not fired a single shot. They had not lost a single soldier. They had simply understood something the empire had forgotten over 10,000 years of unchallenged power. A civilization that cannot pay its bills cannot rule. The final act did not take place on a battlefield. It took place in a room, a vast, echoing chamber in the heart of the collapsing empire, where the hegemony's surviving leaders had gathered to witness the end of their world. They had summoned humanity, not to fight, but to beg. They had run out of options. Their treasury was empty. Their currency was worthless. Their fleet was frozen. They had nothing left but their pride. And even that was crumbling. Humanity sent a delegation. Not soldiers, not generals. Bankers, traders, and at the head of it, a quiet man in an unremarkable suit, carrying a single datapad, Marcus Chen. The bookkeeper. Behind him, silent and terrible, stood the keeper of the ledger, the empire's own weapon, turned to face the hand that had wielded it. "We will save you," Marcus said. "We will restore the value of your currency. We will fund your payroll. We will keep your fleet in the sky and your empire standing. In exchange, we want total deregulation. We want open access to every market in your dominion. We want the tribute system dismantled. Not abolished, but transferred. We want the right to collect it, to manage it, to price it, and we want the hegemony's leaders to sign a document they did not fully understand, at the bottom of a page they did not read, in a language their own lawyers could no longer parse. They signed. It was not a conquest. It was a leveraged buyout, the largest in the history of the universe. Humanity did not conquer the hegemony. We bought it. We bought it at a price so low it was almost insulting. With money we ourselves had created, backed by nothing, secured by a mirror we had built, and an empire too arrogant to look behind it. The transition was seamless. There was no revolution, no uprising, no war of liberation. One day the hegemony ruled the galaxy through an ancient fiscal law. The next day, Earth's hedge funds ruled it through a modern one. The former masters, the proud, ancient, eternal tax collectors of 1,000 species, became what they had made of everyone else. Junior partners, Marcus Chen went back to his bookkeeping. That's the part that made the empire nervous for generations afterward. He didn't want a palace. He didn't want a crown. He wanted a quiet desk and the knowledge that he had done the most dangerous thing a human being can do. He had looked at a system everyone believed was eternal, and he had found the seam. They thought they were adding another obedient line to an ancient ledger. They were wrong. They were the line. And we were the hand that wrote it. The Galactic Hegemony believed its law was eternal. Humanity proved that eternity is just a number, and every number, no matter how vast, can be negotiated. What do you think humanity would do with this kind of power? If we truly had it, would we free the galaxy, or would we simply become the most efficient tax collectors it has ever known? Let us know your theories in the comments below. And if you want more stories of human defiance, of small blue worlds that refuse to bow to ancient powers, subscribe to HFY Legends, because the universe is full of empires that believe they are eternal. They are always wrong. For more HFY stories, subscribe to HFY Legends.